It's Weighing In, NJ.com's high school wrestling podcast.
How's it going, everyone? Ryan Patti from NJ.com here, joined by my three fellow New Jersey high school wrestling experts, and Bill Evans, Joe Zedalis, and Jake Aferiat for episode number 5 of Weighing In, your go-to New Jersey high school wrestling podcast. This is a big episode, and it's going to be headlined by our reaction to the postseason seeding. We now know what every section looks like in terms of pairings for the playoffs, and we're going to dive into all the brackets, not all of them, but some ones that we find the most intriguing, the top seeds that we think could be on upset alert in the quarterfinals and the semifinals. By the time our next episode comes around, we'll be previewing the sectional finals. So we'll look at just the quarters and semis on what could happen there. We can take a quick look at what could happen in the finals, and we're going to try to not overlap with all these sections. We're also going to take a look at the 5, 6, 7, and maybe even some 8 seeds that we could make some deep runs in the postseason. And we're also going to get a quick look at the non-public A and B brackets. I know we all kind of have a little bit of opinion there on what happened, but obviously the quarterfinals matchups for the non-publics will be kind of what we're looking at. We're not going to be able to dive into the semifinals yet, like I said, because the publics, the sectional finals, we'll be talking about those, and then for the non-publics will be the semifinals by next week comes around. So I think we would be hard pressed not to talk about what happened last week to kind of end the week. And that was we had Delbarton over Blair on Thursday in Morristown, 30-29 for the first time ever. And it was the 4th year in a row that it came down to heavyweight. And on the last episode, I believe I said the past 2 years it came down to heavyweight, but it was actually the past 3 years. I forgot about Thomas Stewart's win over Connor Martin in 2022. But it was Augie Moser's turn to be the hero this time, and he got it done. He got 2 takedowns as part of a 7-2 decision over TJ Kellis, a really promising freshman there from Blair. It sent the Delbarton gym into an absolute frenzy. It was the craziest duel I've ever covered. It was one of the craziest wrestling environments I've ever been in, and I've been in some crazy ones. I mean, I've covered this match the past 2 years. The Bergen Catholic St. Joe's matches from a couple years ago when St. Joe's ended that streak that Bergen had over them that went like, I think, 25 years. The first match I ever covered was in 2019, Phillipsburg at High Point. Our guy Pat Lanny was teaching me what a takedown was, and a day later I was in that gym and my head was just spinning. Fantastic duel. But this one on Thursday, I mean, kind of took the cake. The match had so many twists and turns. Delby won without 2 of its really good wrestlers in Trevor Jones and CJ Betts. Obviously, Blair was missing 2 starters as well in Peter Snyder and Kel Melnick. But this is huge for Delby. I mean, their top priority is always going to be getting as many titles in Atlantic City as possible. But this is one that I know they wanted to get badly under their belt, because when you're a top program, you want to be able to say you beat Blair, and now Delbarton can say that. Bill, you had a lot of stuff go on this past week. Paul Morina is closing in on history, and on Friday you had St. Augustine upset Delsey in a match that kind of caught us all by surprise.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, again, we've talked about St. Augustine this year and how young they are and how promising, and they've picked up some good wins. They were 2-2 with the Catholic school duels, and they were 2-2 with the Virginia duels, and they've really kind of held their own, dominated a pretty good Lower Cape May team earlier this season. Split with Bosco during the season. Beat Paramus Catholic. Also lost to Pope John. So they've been a little up and down, but they've certainly held their own. They definitely came in as the underdog here. Coach Bill Ward said he thought they could win 8 matches and still lose, and that's almost what happened. They ended up winning that 35-34 despite winning 8 matches. Carter Pack, who was a region champ as a freshman and was injured for the last 2 individual postseasons, has had a tremendous bounce back year. He majored Gage Summers, who we had ranked in our top 8 at 126 pounds. And then that major decision really came into play. Without that extra point, they don't win the match. Then it comes down to Ronnie Krause, who was a senior that's been around 500 most of the year. At one point had lost, I think it was 6 straight matches, but really was kind of grinded out a win. He was down 7-1 to Greg Sawyer from Delsey, who's had a tremendous sophomore season. Got a takedown at the end of the second period, and that got the match to 7-5. And, that's kind of that 3-point takedown, we've talked about all year. Like all of a sudden you're back in the match, escape to start the third period, and you could really feel the momentum changing, and he got 2 takedowns. And, Silverstein came up with, what was considered a pretty solid upset. From Delsey's standpoint, they'd been dominating most of the teams all year, outside of their one loss to St. John Vianney. And, these two teams wrestled this match toward the end of the year for, a while now. And I know Delsey likes it because even if they lose, it really gets them, set up for the postseason. And Coach Tom Maxwell said that after, I'd rather lose some of these close matches now than to do it against Cranford or Brick Memorial or Lacey in the playoffs. So a tremendous performance by St. Augustine. Moved them up, or will probably more than likely move them up in our rankings. I think, and we'll talk about it later. Definitely, I think impacted their seeding in non-public A, and was really the cherry on top of it from an individual standpoint from a team standpoint to this point for them, for what's been a really good season considering their youth. And then, like you said, Paul Morina, Monday against Lindenwold, tied Stan Woods with his 802nd win, and will be going for the state record on Wednesday night against West Stepford in what is should be a phenomenal match. Paulsboro has dominated West Stepford throughout their history, and last year West Stepford stunned them, beat them for the first time in 56 seasons. Won by 37 points in a match that they were underdogs in. Paulsboro had only won 3 matches in that match, and 2 of them were by forfeit. I kind of broke it down earlier today, and it's going to be very close. I actually had a 28-28, and there's probably 4 toss-ups in there that you could say could go either way. So I'm sure, Paulsboro would love to get, and Paul Morina especially would love to get that tomorrow, or will be today once you're listening to this, at home against West Stepford, and kind of get it out of the way in a sense before the playoffs, but also, to be able to do so in what should be a tremendous match against their rivals. And, it'll be well deserved whenever it happens. If it doesn't happen on Wednesday, likely Monday in the first round of the playoffs, which Paulsboro will host as the number 2 seed. So regardless, it's going to be at home, and it'll happen in the next week or so. But great opportunity for it to happen in front of what I'm sure will be a great crowd, and what should be an incredible match on Wednesday night.
Joe, you had 2 sure unbeatens take a tumble last week.
Yes, on Saturday, Tonsor South and Middletown North were both bounced from the ranks of the unbeaten. Tonsor North lost to Ocean 39-33. It lost 4 of 6 bouts between 215 and 120. Tonsor South had its streak ended at 15 wins. They were defeated 45-25 by Point Borough. South lost 4 bouts between 106 and 126. And the only reason I think it's significant is, these 2 teams were ranked really high in the playoff rankings. In fact, Tonsor South, until the 6th recalc on Sunday night, was going to be the 1 seed in South 4, and they tumbled. I think what these 2 losses showed is that these teams are not invincible, and they do have some holes that maybe can be exploited in the tournament, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, epic way to end last week. And now right on the horizon here, starting next week, is the postseason here. So let's kind of dive into these brackets right away. One that pops off the screen to me is North 1 Group 4. It's absolutely fantastic. You have the reigning Group 4 champion in Ridge that, yes, has, maybe lost a duel or 2 more than we thought they would this year, but they're the 3 seed in this section. Phillipsburg was in Group 1 last year, the runner-ups to Southern. They're now in Group 4, and the Liners are the top seed in this section. They were a monster in Group 5, and now they're in 4, and they're the top seed with the head-to-head win over Mount Olive. Mount Olive's the number 2 seed. Mount Olive lost to Ridge last year in the Group 4 final, so you're looking at 2 state champs in recent years and a finalist as the top 3 seeds here. And, all 3 of those teams were at one point in our top 20 rankings. Mount Olive and Phillipsburg are still ranked. And you have a Morris Knowles team that's had a really good year this year out of the NJAC. They're the 4 seed. They're 15-4 on the year, and their losses have come to very good teams in Kittatinny, West Morris, Delaware Valley, and Cedar Grove. I think we could very well see Chalk advance to the semifinals here. And then, I mean, from there, it's probably going to get really epic. I mean, you have a state finals rematch at the bottom of the bracket potentially in Mount Olive and Ridge. And then if Mount Olive advances, you'd get a matchup of state finalists from last year in Mount Olive and Phillipsburg in the sectional final. And it'd be one of the best duels that we've seen this year. It was one of the best duels we've seen this year, December 21st, when Peaburg beat Mount Olive 32-30. Mount Olive was missing a couple of their starters, but it was an awesome duel. And I think that this one, if we get it in the sectional final, can even top that. So, Jake, we haven't introduced you yet to this episode. What's the section that's kind of got your attention right now?
Yes, there are two. One I'll touch on more than the other, and that one is Central Group 5. And, I think the thing that makes this section the most compelling is of the 8 teams in that field, 5 of them are from the Greater Middlesex Conference, and a bunch of them have head-to-heads with each other, including, if you look at the 4-5 matchup right out of the gate, that's Edison against East Brunswick. Edison's the 4, East Brunswick's the 4, Edison's the 5. And, East Brunswick won that match 45-29 earlier this year. It's one of only 5 wins on the year for Coach Joey Langle's group. But, a 16-point deficit isn't insurmountable in my mind. And, Edison's got Fernando Avalon, who's undefeated, was a county champ. They have a bunch of other solid kids throughout that lineup. East Brunswick has Jake Guski at 138. So, that's a great matchup to watch there, kind of in the upper middleweights or lower middleweights, however you think about it. So that's one that I think is going to be interesting, at least in the first round. Now, they're going to have the misfortune of probably wrestling top seed Old Bridge in the semifinal, and all 3 of those teams are in the GMC's red division. So Old Bridge kind of took it to both of those teams earlier this year. But on the Old Bridge front, they're the top seed in this section. And for a long time, Howell and Hunterdon Central and, occasionally a team like a Bridgewater Raritan were kind of the standard bearers in this section and were sort of the prohibitive favorites to win. Howell is in South Jersey Group 5 this year, and Hunterdon Central is 2-15 and the number 7 seed. So they were on an opposite side of the bracket from Old Bridge. So I think that, Coach John Post was telling me he likes his team's chances to certainly, get to the final, if not win Old Bridge's first section title since 2002. And they have 7 wrestlers with 15 plus wins and 2 with 20 plus wins. So, I think they have a bunch of guys kind of spread throughout that lineup who know how to win, who know how to get the job done. And so I think, Old Bridge on the top half of the bracket is a team that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. But where I think the most intrigue is on the bottom half. You look at Monroe, which is the number 2 seed. They've wrestled a ton this year. They're 14-13 right now. There might not be a team in the state tournament outside of Delbarton that's wrestled 27 dual meets. And, they've wrestled some good teams. They've wrestled Ocean. They've wrestled Rahway, who's a high seed. They've wrestled South Plainfield, who's the number 2 seed in their section. They wrestled Coltsnick, who's the number 2 in their section. They've wrestled Southern. They've wrestled Bridgewater, who's the top seed in North 2 Group 5. So, Coach Joe Urls made it a point to see that his guys have gotten good competition. We'll see how much that pays dividends, especially against a team that I think could be a sleeper to win it, which is Hillsborough as the number 3 seed. The Raiders have never won a section title, but I think this is one of their best teams they've had in years. They returned a lot of kids who had a lot of success last year. They've done well on the individual front at the Somerset County tournament and some other tournaments. They have good wins over Hanover Park, who, that win keeps looking better and better as Hanover Park keeps doing well. They beat Paulsboro, who's been on the rise. They beat Coltsneck. And those are 3 teams that are either top 1 or 2 seeds in their respective sections. They only lost by 11 to a now top 20 North Hunterdon team. So I think Hillsborough, the number 3, would be a real team to keep an eye on. And I think a Hillsborough against Old Bridge match would be really interesting. And then just quickly, I want to just mention North 2 Group 3. I think Cranford, probably the prohibitive favorite there. And, I think for good reason. Pat Gorman always does a great job with his group. But again, I'm looking at the bottom half of that bracket, and Warren Hills is the number 3 seed. They're 10-9. In my mind, they're much better than their record indicates. They wrestle a tough Skyland Conference schedule. Plus, they've had Mount Olive, Gloucester, Bridgewater, Raritan, Ridge, Kingsway, Long Branch, Phillipsburg. So, these guys are well tested. They know how to rise to the occasion against good teams. They know what a good team looks like and what it takes to beat them. And in the semifinals, they might face the number 2 seed South Plainfield. And what a turnaround it's been this year for Coach Steve Johnston. They were 7-13 last year, which for one of the state's preeminent programs, probably up there with Paulsboro and Phillipsburg in terms of fame, is a down year by their standards. They were the number 7 seed. They lost by 3, almost sprung an upset. This year, now they're 12-5. They're the number 2 seed in North 2 Group 3. So I think, it'll be interesting to see South Plainfield and kind of how much and how far they can kind of carry their momentum and keep building on this bounce back season.
Bill, what's got your attention in South Group 4?
Yeah, South Jersey, some years, is better than others, obviously. But, I think there's been a couple of years where there wasn't a lot of intrigue. And I think this is not one of those years. I think every group really is interesting to some degree. Now, granted, Group 3 and Group 5, where you have Delsey and Southern at the top, it's going to be tough for somebody to knock one of those teams off. But I think there's a lot of matchups down the bracket, be it the quarters or the semis in both of those groups that are going to be very interesting. And we're going to touch on 2 and 4, which are more wide open a little later on. But I think the one we all have to keep an eye on is South Jersey Group 1. And we talked about Paul Morina, who has 802 career wins, and you don't do that without winning a couple championships along the way. And, they started handing out sectional championship trophies in 1980. And since then, 45 years ago, there's only been one time when Paulsboro did not win South Jersey Group 1, and that was in 2008. They lost to Collingswood in the last 45 seconds of the final match, and that's the only time somebody's beat them. And there haven't been too many times since when there's even been a question of whether Paulsboro was going to win. They were talking the other day about and I think it was in the early 2000s, maybe 2001 or 2002 or 3, somewhere in that range. After Paulsboro graduated this stellar senior class, where Pittman and Shalleck, I remember, were real close to them. And I kind of wrote a story about how, Paulsboro is probably going to win this, but there's like a 2% chance that they don't. And, that's rare because it's always 100%, chance that they're going to win. And they ended up winning over Pittman by 15 in a real close match. 2011, they lost to Haddonfield during the season and came back and beat them in the playoffs. And since it's pretty much been chalk. But this year Paulsboro is 11-7. It's their most losses since 1968, and they already have a loss to one of the other contenders, and that's Audubon. So obviously they're potentially headed for a rematch. Paulsboro did get Kyer Harvey back since then. It was has won his 5 or 6 matches since he came back. That would be a big addition. They lost some toss-ups there the first time, can certainly win the second, but this is probably their biggest chance to not make it through the section since that 2011 match. They would also have to face Woodstown, who matches up fairly well with them in the semis. So question of whether they maybe even get to the final, which we don't usually talk about. But that's going to be very interesting, because if somebody other than Paulsboro comes out of that group, that will be a historic result.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say South Jersey Group 1. I know you want to talk about South Jersey Group 4 in the next segment. Joe, what's got your attention right now? What's the bracket you're keeping an eye on?
Well, I'm going to go off on a tangent for a moment. I think New Jersey needs to run a geological study to find out how Howell slipped from Central Jersey last year to South Jersey this year. I wonder if the New Jersey earthquakes slid that municipality south. There's no reason for Howell to be in South Jersey Group 5 with Southern. And even this is one of John Gagliano's younger teams. Jake noted that, those contenders in Central 4, well, the best team in Central Jersey Group 4 is Howell, but they're in South Jersey. But anyway, I digress. Now on to the one that has my attention is Central Jersey Group 3. Hopewell Valley is the top seed there. They're 18-3, and I know what they're going to say. They don't wrestle anybody, and they've lost 2 of their last 3 to Wayne Valley and Old Bridge. But in the final recount, Brick Memorial slid a spot. Hopewell Valley assumed the number one seed. Hopewell's going to take a take on Matawan. Matawan was the number 9, but when Lawrence did not opt in to the tournament, Matawan moved to the 8th seed. In the upper bracket with Hopewell are 2 more CVC teams, Allentown and Robbinsville. It's a rematch of a Jan 8th match when Robbinsville won the match 38-34. That should be a heck of a duel. I don't think either of them can hang with Hopewell, though. But in the bottom bracket, I think it's really interesting. You have Burlington Township as the 6, 15-6, and I think Bill would agree with me that they're having a really, really good year. They're going to be matched against Jackson Liberty. Now, the big question with Jackson Liberty is, will Armani McCann be back? He hasn't wrestled in about a month. I know he's due back soon. I'm just not sure when. I don't think they are either. Then, of course, also in the bracket, I think Brick Memorial rolls past its crosstown rival Brick. But that matchup in the bottom bracket in round 2, Brick Memorial and Jackson Liberty, could be really interesting because it was the first time they wrestled on January 4th. They had a 7-7 split. Memorial won 35-31. Now, if Jackson Liberty has everybody back, an upset here or there, I think it could be a really, really interesting dual meet. And it would be what makes it a little more feisty here is the Jackson Liberty coach is Gianni Gione, one of the finest wrestlers in Brick Memorial history. So that's the one I have my eye on, Ryan.
All right, let's dive into some of these 1 and 2 seeds that we could probably put on upset alert. Nothing's guaranteed, obviously, but in wrestling, anything could happen, especially this time of year. And we saw that, Exhibit A in North 1 Group 3 last year when 7-seeded Wayne Valley won the whole thing, beat 8-seeded Montville in the final. And on that note, I'm putting Ultapan on upset alert again. They're the top seed in that section. They lost to 8-seeded Montville last year, and Montville is a 3 seed this year. And obviously, this is a new year, and Ultapan's very, very good. They're one of the best teams in all of Group 3. They were the top team in the county tournament in terms of scoring. They've had an unbelievable year. Their lone loss was to Don Bosco. And then you had, like I said, the 7-seeded Wayne Valley last year make it through the whole thing. And now they're the 2 seed in the bracket this year. And there's a lot of other good teams in this section. You have a Riverdale team that's the 5 seed that's looked very good all year. And so is Ramapo. They've done a lot of things both as a team and individually. You have a 6-seeded Paramus team that could be sneaky good. And then 7-seeded Demrest, 8-seeded Woodridge are very, very battle-tested. Beckton Woodridge, that is. Beckton is 16-3 on the year. They've been one of the best teams in the NJIC. So overall, I trust Ultapan a lot this year. Do I think they're going to get upset? No. Do I think they're going to make the sectional final? Yes, but anything could happen. We saw that last year in this very section. So lightning doesn't usually strike twice, but it's wrestling, like I said. Anything could happen. So, Bill, what do you see in South Group 4 at the top of the bracket that's got your attention?
Yeah, we've been talking about this group, for the last couple of weeks and just how teams have kind of been jockeying for position. And, there isn't much difference really between the top and the bottom. There's, as Joe mentioned, Toms River South, just lost its first match, was the number 1 seed and ended up as the number 4 seed. Williamstown's been creeping up and finished as the number 1 seed. Northern Burlington was kind of in the middle of the pack and is now the 2 seed. This team's made some late pushes, but Williamstown is facing Central Regional, who's had a breakout season in the first round. That's a 15-10 8 seed. I would favor Williamstown, but that's a better 8 seed than you see in some other brackets. And then again, Toms River South faces Hamilton first. Good first round matchup, but if it's Toms River South and Williamstown, that's a excellent semifinal. And then you go to the other side. Northern Burlington hosts Clearview. Northern Burlington's the 2, Clearview's the 7. Clearview beat Northern Burlington this year. So Northern Burlington is definitely on upset alert because Clearview has already beaten them. Then you got Shawnee Toms River East on the other side. Just a very balanced bracket. Would not be surprised if it's Williamstown, Northern Burlington, 1 versus 2 on Wednesday. But certainly wouldn't be surprised if it was 4 versus 7 either, or any combination of these 8 teams, because again, there's not much separating 1 through 8.
Joe, who's on upset alert for you?
Ryan, I think upset alert is Long Branch in Central Jersey Group 4. You know, the Green Wave is 10-8 and the number 1 seed with that record. They have victories over Shawnee and Warren Hills and Northern Burlington, Woodstown. They have Jackson Memorial, which is struggling through the season, but those teams have had some great dual meets over the years in this tournament. So, you know, I think Long Branch will get through there, but the team I have my eye on as the upsetter of Long Branch is Manalapan. Manalapan's really come on of late. They have won 6 of their last 9. Their last victory came over the weekend, a 33-31 win over a solid Gloucester team. I think Bill has, you know, can confirm that they've had a pretty good season, but I think Manalapan could be the team to sneak through there in the upper bracket. They have been wrestling well. They've had some kids who were out of the lineup and they come back. So I think that second round match at Long Branch be one to keep an eye on, Ryan.
Jake, what do you got in terms of teams that you think could take an early exit?
Yeah, I think, Joe mentioned a couple of source teams who were top seeds who he thought could be on upset alert. I have one as well. Similar to Joe's spiel about, geology and geography, Middletown North is in North 2, Group 4, in a section with teams like Watchung Hills, North Hunterdon, Sayreville. So it's just funny to me to see a team from the shore in a North Jersey bracket. But, I think the Lions are a team that would be my pick to be on an upset alert. They're 56-9 over their last 3 seasons, which is fantastic. Most teams would love to have a 3-season stretch like that. But each of the last 3 seasons, they've went home after a section semifinal. So, they're the top seed here. I think they should get past Westfield, who's the 8, no problem. But the team that I think could pose problems for Mid-North is Watchung Hills. Mid-North's best wins are against, teams like RBC, Point Borough, Howell, Middletown South, Lacey. And those are all good teams. And there's a lot of good wrestling in the Shore Conference. And, if you look at Watchung Hills, their best wins are against Bridgewater, Seneca, Colts Neck, Livingston, Kittatinny. So, you could make the argument that the strength of schedule point kind of a wash maybe for both teams. What I think is interesting is Middletown North has 4 20-plus win wrestlers at 106, 120, 126, and 150. Watchung Hills has 5 at 120, 126 in Anthony DeAndrea, who's a 2-time state medalist, 175, 190 in heavyweight. So, I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. Coach Jim Huff was telling me like they've been preparing to wrestle Middletown North in the section semis and North Hunterdon, who's the 2 seed in the section final, for the last couple of weeks. And he's repeatedly said to me that he likes how they match up with both teams. And, it's his last year at the helm. He's going to be the AD at Parsippany Hills when the season comes to an end in March. So they'll be extra motivated in that one. So, I think for me, the one that stands out the most would be in that North 2 Group 4 semifinal in the top half, with 4th seeded Watchung Hills advancing past top seeded Middletown North.
All right, let's dive into some of these higher seeds, the 5, 6, 7s. We already mentioned a couple 8s as well, but I've got a 7 here that I'm keeping tabs on in North 1 Group 2, and that's Manchester Regional. Do I think Pascack Valley beats them? I do, but this isn't a matchup they should take lightly at all, because Manchester Regional is in the NJSIAA finals. They just beat Emerson Park Ridge in the semis last week. It ended a 7-year run for Emerson in terms of winning the conference championship every single year that it's been held, the 14 playoff. This Manchester Regional team has a lot of untapped potential. A lot of kids who are new to the sport have only been wrestling since they've been in high school. Some of these kids have only wrestled for 1 or 2 years. Keyshawn Hamilton up in the upper weights. Khalil Santiago is another upper weight I like on this team as well. And Aiden Cruz, he's a senior in the lower weights who has kind of showed off what he could do. There's a lot of kids on this team that I really like. And earlier this year, last month, they won their first division title in 41 years. And this is pretty much just a team right now that with the year that they're having, you don't want to be in their way. I don't want to say they're a team of destiny, but they're a team that might not even be wrestling as good as they can. Westwood blew them out last year in the sectional tournament, but in that match, and I was kind of, keeping my eye on the other mat. But I was watching that one a little bit, and I was impressed. I mean, they were winning some bouts and doing some things that I was like, wow, like this is a small school that's kind of on the rise here, and here they are this year in the NJSC finals. I'm excited to see them against Hasbrook Heights tomorrow. You guys are going to hear this on Wednesday. It's being wrestled on a Thursday, but like I said, I mean, Pascagoula Valley probably still gets by, and the Panthers have a team that can compete for a championship. But this Falcons team for Manchester Regional is dangerous. I mean, I'm excited to see how this one shakes out, how close they could keep it. But Bill, what's the team down south that we should be keeping an eye on here?
On Saturday, I went to a quad meet over at Sterling for two reasons. One, I wanted to see Anthony Jackson from Paul VI, who has pinned everybody he has wrestled in the first period this year, continued to do so. And the other reason was to see Middle Township, because I kind of feel like they're a contender in Group South Jersey Group 2. And Joe talked a lot about that last recalc. When I went there that Saturday, which was the cutoff day, they were sitting in the 3 seed. They had been up they had been up in 2, I think, at some point in the previous weeks, and they were trying to kind of catch up with West Stepford, who was the 2, Lower Cape May was the 1, and hopefully get to host the semifinal, which they've never done in their history. They'd never even made a playoffs until 2019, and then last year was the first time they'd won a playoff match when they stunned Haddonfield, who was the defending champion in the first round. So their goals are set higher. They brought a lot of guys back from that team. They're very solid up top. When you look at Max Adalizzi and Sean Watkins and Maurice Matthews from 190 to heavyweight, have a really good wrestler in the middle and Tyler King, couple good kids down low. It's a very solid team, and again, they were hoping to get that 2 seed, and then after that last recalc, they didn't go up; they went down. Not only 1 spot, but 2, and ended up the 5 seed. They're going to wrestle Collingswood in a little bit of an interesting first round matchup. As it turned out, West Stepford actually ended up jumping over Lower Cape May, and so that semifinal that we thought might have been the 2-3 it could now be the 1-5. This team has only lost 3 times. They lost to Lower Cape May by 5 points on a match that was tied going into the last weight. Unfortunately for Middle, Lower Cape May's final wrestler was Chase Hansen, who's a 2-time state place winner. They lost to St. Augustine only by 15 earlier in the year. That was, to me, real wake up to how good this team could be. And they also lost to a pretty good Ocean City team. But that's it. And to me, they're in this mix. They could certainly be Collingswood in that first round, and West Stepford. That could be a very interesting matchup. I think they get a lot of points up top against them, and could be a good matchup for them. So, their goal is to win a sectional title. Their first sectional title. They want to get back. They want to get another shot at Lower Cape May. They could potentially see them in the final. I don't think the fact that they dropped to the 5 seed changes that. So they're a very interesting number 5 for me.
Joe, who's the sure team that could do something special here as kind of an under the radar type of team?
Well, I wish I could tell you I had a 6, a 7, or an 8 who might be able to spring an upset. But if you look at the Central Jersey brackets, I mean, Group 1 is chalk with Delaware Valley. Group 2 is chalk with Rumson Fairhaven. But the team I think that's flying under the radar here, Ryan, is Heightstown. They're the number 3 seed in Central 4. They're having a great year. They're 14-6. They opened the season 8-0. I think they get through their first match, but then they're going to have an interesting match with Colts Neck. Colts Neck is the number 2. They're 9-11. They've lost 7 of their last 8 dual meets and somehow managed to hold on to number 2. But I guess that's the way the math worked. But I think, how often do I talk about two CVC teams in the same episode? It's rather rare, but I think, they've wrestled a good schedule. They've wrestled a competitive schedule. I think they're maybe ready for this more so than they've been in other years. I mean, and they've learned how to win close matches. They've won 4 wins by 10 points or less. I think it'll be a close match with Colts Neck, but I think there's a possibility of them slipping through to the semifinals, and it'll be a short run, but I think it would be a momentous one for Heightstown guys.
Joe loves the shore, but he also loves the CVC. Jake, what do you got in terms of under the radar teams that can do something special, spurn a big upset?
Yeah, so I think in my mind, the one kind of when I saw the brackets that immediately jumped out to me was in North through Group 5. Sixth seeded Newark East Side. They've lost 5 in a row, and this is going to sound weird, but I think it's actually played to their benefit because what that's done is it's dropped them from the top half of the bracket where they would have to travel to Bridgewater, who they just lost to 58-17 on the cutoff day, who's the top seed if, East Side stayed the 4 seed, the 5 seed. But by being the 6th, they travel to Union, and, they lost to Union on December 12th. So that's what, 2.5, 3 months ago now, or, maybe a little bit less. But, that was a 41-36 loss. So, 5 points is nothing in this sport. I mean, that's literally one bout. And, if East Side can, pull the right strings and, do some, lineup maneuvering and, the flip goes their way, an upset there and a sectional final berth isn't out of the realm of possibility, which for a program like that would be momentous. And, they're going to have a hard task in their first round matchup against third seeded Bayonne. But the encouraging thing is they beat Bayonne by 8 earlier this year, 41-33 back on December 20th. And again, a lot can change from December to February, but having that proof of concept and, knowing that you're not even just capable of hanging with both of those teams, but potentially beating, the 2 teams that stand in your way. I was texting with Pedro Marks before. He said, up top, they haven't been as strong as in years past, but down low and in the middle, they're still just as good. Marcelo Grippi for them is kind of their go-to, their catalyst. He was a county finalist. So, I think the Red Raiders of East Side, if it's not out of the realm of possibility that all goes their way and that they're traveling to Bridgewater for a section final next week. So, I think that would be huge for that program and certainly 2 of the biggest wins in program history.
All right, to wrap up the episode, let's take a quick look at what happened here with the seeding in non-public A and B. Like I said, when we record our next episode next Tuesday, it's going to be the first round and the quarterfinal round. That's the day the first round and the quarterfinal round of the non-publics will be wrestled. So I don't know how much we want to dive in here, but in non-public A, our post from the other day where we, came out with how we thought that both brackets should be seeded, we kind of hit the nail on the head in non-public A, with the exception of the 5 and 6. Bergen is the 5 and St. Joe's is the 6. We thought it was going to be the other way around. And Bergen has the most recent loss to St. Joe's. They lost on criteria. They beat St. Joe's at the Catholic duels, but every weight they won in that match was because St. Joe's forfeited that weight. And there's a lot of fun matchups in non-public A. I mean, you could get in the quarterfinals a CBA St. Joe's rematch. Bergen Vianney in the 4-5 could be fantastic. But I think with how this played out, if you're Seton Hall Prep, you got to be a little ticked off because you draw St. Joe's. And, if you're St. Peter's, you're getting a St. Joe's team that, like I said in the last episode, I mean, 8 state medalists. They have JoJo Burke and Christian Alvarez who are wrestling their tails off right now. They look absolutely phenomenal. They seem podium bound. I mean, they look really, really good. And in my opinion, I think St. Joe's is the second best team in the state. And St. Peter's has a win over CBA. They have a win over Bergen. So the fact that you could potentially, draw St. Joe's here in the semifinals, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but that's got to irk me if I'm Coach Verdi. But I still think they can win that match. It's a lot harder of a match, but I think they can win it. But St. Joe's has to get past CBA, which they didn't do, but they're healthier now. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But in non-public B, we were pretty close, I guess you could say, but we had St. Thomas getting the 6 and St. Mary Rutherford getting the 7, and it was the opposite. So, like I said, we were pretty close there. It kind of played out how we thought it would. But Joe, you voiced your frustration during football season with how the non-publics were seeded. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this. What do you make of what we got this morning?
Well, I'm going to quote Bill Evans, who had this statement, and it was 100% correct before we began the broadcast. At least it wasn't as bad as football. So I guess that's the good thing. In wrestling, fans should know there is a vague criteria that the seating committee uses. And I guess that came into play. But, you still wonder, you're still not given any explanation as to why they decided to put this team 5 and this team 6. And again, that's something that's a problem with me. There should be an openness about this process, and there still is not. Now, you know what? The 6-5, 5-6, you're still going to have to beat somebody to get to the final, and then in all likelihood lose to Delbarton. But again, I just don't really understand why there's this cloak and dagger kind of thing where we got to have big secrets. We got to go into a room and lock the doors, and then I don't know, like the pipe, like the selection of a new pope with the white smoke. But I don't think it's that bad. I can tell you this: the hardest tickets to get are going to be those at CBA and St. John Vianney next Tuesday, and they're going to be great matches. That's the only good thing. We may not agree how they were placed, but we can't deny that it's going to be great wrestling.
Bill, what do you got? What do you make of all this?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it maybe opens the door for a final that might be the 2 best teams in the state now that St. Joe's Mon is healthier. Could be we thought St. Joe's should have been the 5, but again, it's one spot. It's a big spot, obviously, because you'd rather be on the opposite side other than Delbarton. We also saw St. Augustine come in with that win over Delsey, and that looks like that really impacted their seed, and they've jumped all the way up to 7, and now we get St. Augustine Don Bosco Part 3. They split the first 2 times, and that'll be the 7-10 matchup, which should be a fascinating match with the winner to get St. Peter's. So they won't be able to get to celebrate too much. And then like you said, in non-public B, I think you got 3 teams there. There's a drop off. I believe Camden Catholic is definitely the one, and then an interesting semifinal between Red Bank Catholic and Pope John, with the winner more than likely to face Camden Catholic on that on Rutgers on that Sunday, February 16th. But like you said, I mean, I think the matchups are intriguing. When you're talking about CBA and St. Joe's. And to a degree, Vianney and Bergen, I think we're going to get some really good quarters this Tuesday. And so every night is going to be one that we're, kind of keeping an eye on a couple matches that should be very interesting, and will eventually lead us down to Rutgers on 2 Sundays from now.
We're almost there. We're almost going to be at Jersey Mike's Arena. It's not too far away, and it always delivers. So we're very much looking forward to it. But that'll do for episode number 5 of Weighing In. We thank you all for listening, and we also thank our producer, Brian Dekine, as always, for the time he pours into this production. So enjoy the first few days of the postseason, and you'll hear from us again next week ahead of the public sectional finals and the non-public semifinals. Take care, everyone.